The moment my son dumped me on Father's Day, everything I thought I knew about family shattered into pieces, and it hit harder than I ever imagined. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. I remember that morning with painful clarity. The date was June 16, 2024, a Sunday that should have been filled with laughter and gratitude, but instead, it became a quiet battlefield. For years, I had poured my heart and resources into building what I thought was a strong family foundation, teaching values, investing in their future, and yes, even paying for expensive trips to create memories. I was Robert Mitchell, a 67-year-old man who had made a modest fortune in real estate and had always been viewed by others as the solid rock of the family. But being a father and a grandfather did not shield me from being blindsided. It all began when I woke up around 7 a.m., excited about the $27,000 vacation to Aspen that I had meticulously planned and paid for just 2 months earlier. I envisioned Jake, my only son, his wife Emily, and my 2 granddaughters enjoying the mountain air together, a real moment to reconnect, only to find out that Jake had not even bothered to send a reply confirming the trip. At around 8 a.m., my phone started to vibrate incessantly. 54 missed calls from Jake and a barrage of text messages, none of which I had answered because I was out in the garden clearing some weeds. Only then did the harsh truth start seeping in. I called him back. His voice on the other end was cold, clipped, and detached. Not the tone of a son looking forward to spending time with his aging father, but of a man who wanted to get something off his chest, quickly, sharply, and without concern for my feelings. "Dad, I'm not coming," he said bluntly. "Not this time, don't expect me." I paused, heart pounding, a flood of questions racing through my mind. "Jake, what are you talking about? The trip. We all planned this together." "It's changed. Things have changed and I can't do this anymore." No further explanation, just silence. That was my awakening. Up until that moment, I had been a respected patriarch in the family, the man who quietly pulled the strings behind financial decisions, the one everyone sought for advice. Outwardly, they treated me with politeness and respect. But in the shadows, I was being undermined, disregarded, and disrespected. My son's refusal to honor a trip that cost me nearly 30 grand was not just a casual cancellation, it was a signal, a smack in the face that I had become irrelevant in my own home. After hanging up, I sat down and went over every detail. When I first noticed the subtle coldness from Jake, the way Emily's smiles never quite reached her eyes, the vague excuses at family gatherings to avoid me, the strange charges on my credit card statements that I hadn't authorized. Had I missed signs that screamed betrayal because I was too wrapped up in keeping the peace? Now, calm but resolute, I knew I had to act. Not out of anger, but strategy. I didn't want a confrontation born from emotion. I wanted to take control. The discovery that redefined everything came later that morning. While reviewing bank statements linked to the vacation payments, I noticed unauthorized transfers from my investment accounts. A total of $15,000 diverted straight into an unknown account under the name E. Davis. Emily Davis, my daughter-in-law. That was the moment I realized the betrayal was deeper, more calculated, and involved not only Jake but Emily too. My first strategic move was clear. I needed to secure my assets before they vanished altogether. I called my financial advisor, Susan Carter, and instructed her to freeze all my accounts immediately, pending a full audit. But this was just the beginning. I knew from years of experience that direct accusations without proof would backfire. So I decided to step back into the shadows, the place where I had always felt strongest. I would gather evidence, piece by piece, quietly and meticulously. This was no longer about a canceled trip. It was about reclaiming power, dignity, and justice. The morning haze settled in when I finally allowed myself a moment to breathe after that stinging Father's Day revelation. It wasn't just the abrupt cancellation that struck me, but the realization that beneath the surface, cracks had been widening long before I noticed them. What haunted me most were the countless overlooked signs, the silent slights, the hushed whisperings during family dinners, the guarded glances whenever I mentioned future plans. For decades, authority within our family rested on my shoulders like a mantle forged by time and effort. Yet the facade was crumbling. The respect I assumed was reciprocal had somehow mutated into indifference, perhaps even resentment. The discomfort of those silent meals replayed in my mind, each interaction now tinged with the unmistakable echo of condescension. Embracing a detective's mindset, I started retracing the path that led me here. My initial step was a detailed examination of communication patterns with Jake and Emily. Over the years, our conversations had shifted from open, frequent dialogues to terse exchanges and long silences. Pulling out old phone records and text transcripts, I cataloged what had been said, and more importantly, what remained unsaid. Then came the financial review. I am no stranger to numbers, having managed my investments with diligence. Yet, when I scrutinized bank statements from the last 6 months, clear anomalies emerged. Unexplained withdrawals, transfers to an account labeled only as E. Davis, and several credit card charges at unfamiliar establishments. The sum of these irregularities was enough to raise red flags at any financial institution. For me, it spelled betrayal. The next logical step was subtle surveillance. I wasn't about to confront without substance. I needed irrefutable proof. My plan involved enlisting the help of an old friend, James Porter, a retired private investigator whose discretion was unmatched. I reached out discreetly that very afternoon, sharing only necessary details and asking him to observe without raising suspicion. In parallel, I scanned through email exchanges and social media footprints. Technology, which often serves as a playground for younger generations, became my ally. Patterns surfaced. Hidden meetings, coded messages between Jake and Emily, shifts in behavior that aligned perfectly with recent financial activity. Looking back, I recalled certain comments Jake made at last Christmas dinner. His dismissal of my investment advice seemed more dismissive than mere teenage rebellion. In hindsight, it was a calculated move to distance himself from my control. Emily's seemingly innocent inquiries about my accounts now appeared as thin veils masking opportunism. Throughout the day, I maintained a composed exterior. It was essential not to reveal my suspicions prematurely. Emotional reactions, while human, are liabilities in calculated endeavors. Instead, I documented every piece of information meticulously. Time-stamped notes, receipts, screenshots, building a dossier that could withstand scrutiny. Particularly telling revelation came when a mutual acquaintance disclosed that Jake and Emily were considering moving out of state abruptly, a move never mentioned to me but suddenly appearing inevitable. That explained the urgency behind the financial manipulations, as funds were being siphoned to establish a new life elsewhere. As evening fell, I called Susan Carter again, requesting a comprehensive audit of all active accounts. I also instructed her to alert me immediately to any unusual activity. Blocking access temporarily was necessary, but insufficient. I needed to ensure that no further unauthorized transactions occurred. James Porter's first observations arrived via encrypted text late that night. He had spotted Jake meeting with a man unfamiliar to me several times at a downtown cafe, likely a contact in their scheme. This detail changed everything. The conspiracy extended beyond the family circle. It had the complexity of an orchestrated plan rather than a simple family dispute. By midnight, my mind raced with new possibilities for strategy. The betrayal I faced wasn't a momentary lapse or a miscommunication. It was a deliberate, multifaceted assault on my position and assets. My decisions moving forward needed to be aggressive, yet measured. No reckless confrontations, only precision strikes. I began setting a calendar of discrete steps, continued surveillance, legal consultations, and subtle financial responses. The goal was to corner them before they realized they were being hunted. This phase of quiet investigation was crucial. It reaffirmed my role not as a powerless elder discarded by those closest to me, but as a strategic leader ready to reclaim control. What I learned that first day of digging clarified the stakes were higher than the $27,000 trip. They had gambled with my entire legacy. By 2 a.m., I sent a message to my longtime lawyer, Mark Wilson, briefing him with what I already knew and asking for a meeting the following morning. I needed counsel well-versed in both family and financial law to chart the next steps. My plan was crystallizing: gather evidence, protect my resources, and prepare for a calculated response. This was no longer about disappointment. It was about justice, deliberate, firm, and unrelenting. Before allowing myself rest, I reviewed every document again, confirming the inconsistencies and securing digital copies. I couldn't afford any mistakes. The sleeping wolf inside me was ready to awaken and execute a plan months in the making. The days following my initial inquiry were a calculated blend of patience and relentless scrutiny. I chose to remain in the shadows, quietly assembling the pieces that would expose the full scope of the deception. What began as a suspicion over a canceled vacation grew into a probing excavation of trust eroded over years. In retrospect, there were moments that I had dismissed as minor frustrations or typical family squabbles, but now took on a more sinister significance. The sudden disinterest from Jake in my business discussions, the way whispers would hush when I entered the room, even the shifting allegiances within my own relatives. Each subtlety painted a wider picture of a deliberate estrangement. Fueled by necessity, I expanded my review beyond financial transactions. Bank statements, email correspondences, and social media flags were just the start. I tapped into my contacts to cross-check Jake's recent activities. James Porter's surveillance notes became invaluable. Cryptic meetings, unexplained trips, and conversations purposely obscured. It was clear that his alliances reached beyond the immediate family. One revelation struck me sharply. Emily Davis was no innocent bystander, but an active participant in the plot. Several wire transfers from my accounts found their way into ventures registered under her name, disguised as legitimate businesses, but with questionable operational legitimacy. These transfers occurred over a 6-month window ending only days before Father's Day, the same period during which Jake's attitude had soured dramatically. On a humid Wednesday afternoon, my attorney, Mark Wilson, and I convened in my study. I laid out the mounting evidence, meticulously organized files, transaction logs, and recorded observations. Mark's expression darkened as he read through each detail, realizing the implications. "Rob," he said, "you're dealing with a sophisticated scheme. They're attempting to liquidate or divert your assets without your knowledge or consent." The legal pathways were intricate but clear. Immediate injunctions against the transfer of funds, temporary restrictions on any corporate decisions associated with the properties I owned, and the initiation of forensic accounting investigations were all on the agenda. I entrusted Mark with beginning these processes, ensuring the machinery of justice started grinding in my favor. Simultaneously, I deployed another tactic. Knowing Jake's tendency to communicate through intermediaries, I reached out deliberately to distant family members who had unwittingly been pulled into the unfolding drama. My brother Thomas, unexpectedly, responded with candid concern. He confirmed that Jake had sought his approval to withdraw from joint family investments. Thomas's discomfort was palpable, and I sensed a fissure. An ally could indeed be coaxed from these strained connections. Undercover inquiries further revealed that Jake and Emily had contacted a small group of external associates, specializing in discrete property liquidation and financial laundering. This coordination was alarming, demonstrating premeditation and a clear intent to usurp control rapidly. It was crucial that these external links be severed. Financial institutions became allies. By collaborating with my advisor, Susan Carter, bank officials were instructed to flag every unusual activity connected to my holdings. Within 48 hours, flagged transactions confirmed further attempts to move funds, some as large as $8,500 at a time, cleverly structured to evade immediate detection. The smaller withdrawals were basically drip-fed out under the radar, a common tactic in embezzlement. The more I uncovered, the clearer the timeline became. Jake's motivations were not only financial but personal. He viewed himself as marginalized, perhaps entitled to a greater share, but his methods were reckless and disrespectful. Every clandestine withdrawal and every evasive meeting was a dagger to the trust I thought our family cherished. By that weekend, I had expanded the investigation team. An independent auditor, Lisa Harper, was engaged to conduct a full review of all holdings under my name, corporate and personal. She arrived with an impressive resume, and after our first session, I was certain she was the missing piece. Lisa was relentless but precise, no room for errors. One evening, sitting in my home office reviewing her preliminary report, I found references to property deeds registered in Jake and Emily's names without my authorization. While legally complex, these transfers were initiated through forged signatures and creative interpretation of power of attorney clauses, clear evidence of fraud. This new discovery shook me momentarily. They had crossed into criminal territory, risking far greater consequences than I had first imagined. It fortified my resolve to escalate the matter decisively. In the background, my contacts returned with unexpected intelligence. David Robinson, my son-in-law and brother-in-law to Jake, had been quietly observing the situation. Unbeknownst to Jake and Emily, David harbored his own grievances with them. He was willing to share valuable inside information that could dismantle the opponent's defenses. At that moment, the playing field shifted. What had seemed an uphill battle now possessed a new lever. David's evidence promised exposure of collusion, secret contracts, and discussions previously hidden from me. He promised to deliver detailed accounts and message exchanges within days. Closing that day's review, I reflected quietly. Every layer peeled back revealed betrayals that were both calculated and cold-hearted. But my preparation had reached a level where countermeasures were carefully aligned, and the tide was slowly turning. The next phase required utmost caution, arming myself with unassailable documentation and establishing a fortress of legal and financial protection. Jake and Emily had initiated the war of deception, but soon they would face a strategist unwilling to concede. By the end of that intense week, it was clear that survival required more than just financial vigilance. I had to rebuild an alliance and decipher the true loyalties within my family circle. Betrayal was no longer an abstract concept, but a tangible threat entangling those closest to me. I found myself re-examining relationships that had once seemed immovable, questioning motives, testing trust. My conversation with my brother Thomas proved pivotal. Unlike others caught in the middle, Thomas demonstrated an earnest desire to help. Despite a history of sibling rivalry, he understood that the family's future and his own inheritance depended on halting Jake's reckless moves. Over multiple afternoons, we rebuilt some fragile bridges, quietly coordinating our efforts to unmask the deeper layers of the conspiracy. Unexpectedly, my eldest granddaughter, Claire, revealed herself as a cautious but crucial source. She had noticed financial irregularities on her mother's phone and confided her concerns in hushed tones during a rare visit. Though young and inexperienced, Claire's observations, when combined with digital data from her devices, confirmed some of the financial trails Emily hoped to conceal. These newfound allies reinforced an emerging strategy: intelligence gathering combined with discreet pressure. Each piece of information was a tool, enabling me to anticipate their next moves instead of reacting blindly. Parallel to family outreach, I intensified coordination with my legal team. Mark Wilson, seasoned and pragmatic, laid out a framework for intervention that balanced aggressive legal action with subtle financial maneuvering. The plan involved injunctions to freeze assets, filing motions to prevent unauthorized disposals of property, and preparing civil suits targeting both Jake and Emily for breach of fiduciary duty and fraud. Among these, a critical step was compiling a formal dossier of all evidence collected to date: transaction records, intercepted communications, property transfers, and witness statements. This dossier was not merely for court submission. It was a tactical document designed to leverage negotiations and, if necessary, public exposure. My financial advisor, Susan Carter, meanwhile executed a series of measures that fortified my economic stronghold. Bank accounts were segmented, credit cards reissued with enhanced security, and investment portfolios reconfigured to minimize risk. I even transferred some holdings under trust agreements with independent trustees, placing them beyond the reach of opportunistic hands. The legal and financial fortifications were complemented by technological security upgrades. I employed cybersecurity experts to monitor digital activities surrounding my personal and business accounts. Multiple unauthorized login attempts were flagged immediately, indicating Jake's desperation. David Robinson's involvement became more substantial. His insider perspective shed light on covert agreements and suspicious business dealings that Jake had concealed even from Emily herself. David provided copies of emails between Jake and a local contractor, signaling intent to liquidate shared properties without consent. These revelations allowed me to confront Emily through Mark's mediator role, firmly but without direct accusation, a psychological tactic to unsettle her defenses. The message was clear. I was aware of their actions, fully prepared and watching closely. Simultaneously, I avoided alienating other family members unnecessarily. Maintaining neutrality from certain relatives ensured that Jake could not count on unanimous support in his plans. Subtle conversations and exchanges created fissures in his influence network, weakening his position internally. 1 week into this reinforced offensive, a surprising discovery arrived. Lisa Harper's audit uncovered a forged document purporting to grant Jake power of attorney over one of my most valuable commercial properties, the Lombard building downtown. Though unauthorized and legally void, this forgery demonstrated how far they were willing to go. Mark immediately prepared legal steps to nullify this and related documents, while I requested law enforcement assistance to investigate potential fraud charges. Underneath this rising tide of strategic moves, I carefully managed my demeanor. To the outside world, especially at family gatherings, I remained calm, measured, even cordial. My strength came from discipline, not display. Any sign of weakness would embolden my opponents. In this phase of the struggle, patience was a weapon. Every action, whether a discreet inquiry, a financial safeguard, or a legal procedure, was a calculated step toward reclaiming what was mine and securing my legacy. By the close of this period, the dynamic had shifted unmistakably. My network was no longer fractured but consolidated, combining loyal family members, trusted advisors, and professional allies into a unified front. The enemy was aware of this gathering storm. Their attempts to move assets became more desperate, their communication more cautious. But with each tightening net, my advantage grew. The stakes had escalated beyond dollars and properties. They now encompassed control, respect, and ultimately, justice. My next move would reveal unexpected alliances and deepen the legal battle. The war for my family's future was far from over, but the momentum was decisively mine. With the network firmly in place, it was time to transition from defense to a broader, more assertive strategy, fortifying my position through legal mechanisms and financial rigging designed to minimize risk and maximize leverage. The betrayal had transformed into a complex chessboard, demanding calculated moves executed with precision. Mark Wilson and I convened in his downtown office beneath the hum of the city, a fitting backdrop for the delicate battle we were about to wage. Our primary objective was twofold: neutralize the ongoing threat and prepare for the inevitable confrontation in court. Legal filings to freeze all transactions related to disputed assets were submitted within days, before Jake had a chance to react. We crafted a compelling narrative supported by a meticulous collection of hard evidence. Each wire transfer, forged signature, and unauthorized account access was pinned in detailed exhibits. Our filings included affidavits from Lisa Harper, attesting to the irregularities discovered during the audit, and statements from James Porter about suspicious meetings and interactions. The legal framework was airtight. The key complexity lay in combating the family dimension. These were not faceless adversaries, but blood relatives, entwined with history and emotions. I instructed Mark to pursue a course that emphasized protection over punishment initially. Offers for mediation and settlement were drafted strategically, with clear terms favoring asset security and accountability. This softer approach was designed to unsettle their confidence, forcing them to reveal intentions without outright hostility. Financially, I authorized Susan Carter to reallocate substantial holdings into trusts managed by external fiduciaries. These trusts were structured to grant me control and oversight, while legally preventing unauthorized access or liquidation attempts. Trust agreements were reviewed and updated to include contingency clauses that triggered immediate legal response upon any breach attempts. Throughout these weeks, Susan implemented layered security protocols on all financial accounts tied to my name. Enhanced authentication methods, transaction limits, and real-time monitoring systems were deployed robustly. Any suspicious activity was flagged instantly, ensuring future schemes would face heightened resistance. Meanwhile, David Robinson's intervention evolved into a strategic partnership. His knowledge of Jake and Emily's moves, both financial and personal, gave us a decisive edge. We compiled transcripts of internal communications he obtained, emails, text messages, voicemail recordings that exposed collusion and illegal dealings. This intelligence deepened our case substantially, positioning me not only as a victim, but as a plaintiff with overwhelming proof. During family gatherings, I observed the shifting dynamics clearly. Jake's demeanor grew tense, his usual arrogance replaced by cautious calculation. Emily's smiles became forced, masking the unraveling foundation of their plans. They attempted subtle maneuvers to sway neutral relatives, but found resistance where they had expected support. On multiple occasions, I orchestrated subtle confrontations through Mark's legal office, formal letters reminding them of the severe consequences of continuing unauthorized asset management. These letters were purposely firm, but maintained professional decorum. They served a dual purpose: to act as warnings and to demonstrate my unwavering resolve. At the end of this period, one particularly significant revelation emerged from an unexpected source. Claire, my granddaughter, unearthed a concealed contract buried in her mother's digital files. The document outlined plans for a covert property sale involving significant deposits wired away to an offshore account. This confirmed suspicions that the fraudulent activities extended beyond state lines, involving layers of complexity aimed at making recovery difficult. I immediately passed this information to Mark, who flagged it for federal investigation. The involvement of offshore banking complicated matters legally, but also increased the severity of the offense on their part. It added weight to our impending litigation and sent a clear message regarding the seriousness with which I approached the matter. Throughout this process, I maintained a disciplined routine. Early mornings spent reviewing legal correspondence, afternoons with financial analysts, and evenings in confidential calls with David and trusted family members sharpened my focus. No detail was too small, no lead ignored. This was a calculated tightening of control designed to ensure no further erosion of power. Psychologically, I adopted a detached mindset, treating every development as a move in an elaborate game. This mental distance prevented despair and enabled clear-headed decisions. I was no longer the betrayed father, but the architect of an inevitable restoration. The consequences of each move rippled through the family, legal system, and financial world. Asset freezes halted several lucrative transactions. Legal warnings deterred attempts to recreate forged documents. Surveillance exposed further deceptive contacts. Using this momentum, Mark prepared to escalate the case toward formal litigation, while remaining open to strategic negotiations. In this phase, I felt the tide shifting palpably. The once confident conspirators were visibly rattled, adjusting their tactics but unable to regain the initiative. My control of the narrative and resources was growing stronger daily. The journey was far from over, but the foundation was solid. Evidence fully documented, legal protections enacted, critical alliances formed, and financial defenses firmly in place. My next steps would focus on asserting control over the contested properties and exposing the betrayal to its full extent. The war I never wished to fight had become one I was determined to win, with patience, precision, and unshakable resolve. The moment had arrived to translate months of preparation into decisive action. I moved beyond passive defense into a calculated offensive designed to shake the foundations of Jake and Emily's carefully constructed facade. Everything rested on timing and precision. Any misstep could give them an opportunity to regroup or escape accountability. The first move was to serve formal legal notices demanding immediate cessation of all unauthorized financial and property dealings. Delivered through Mark Wilson's office at dawn on a Monday, These documents were crafted to leave no room for ambiguity. Every transaction, every transfer made without my consent was cataloged and flagged for immediate reversal. Failure to comply meant escalation to criminal proceedings. Simultaneously, I authorized Susan Carter to initiate a freeze on any accounts associated with Jake and Emily, including those indirectly linked through shell corporations identified during the audit. This move cut off the flow of illicit funds, essentially choking their operational capacity. Throughout the following days, I monitored their reactions through a combination of legal feedback, financial alerts, and James Porter's updated surveillance reports. As expected, there was a flurry of activity. Jake and Emily scrambled to salvage what they could, employing contacts that tried to bypass restrictions, but their efforts were met with swift, coordinated responses. One particularly striking incident was a hurried attempt by Jake to access the deed for the Lombard building, the commercial property targeted earlier. Mark's team had already preemptively filed a lien and informed local authorities of the suspected forgery, effectively blocking any transfers. The frustration was palpable through intercepted messages. The once confident scion was now scrambling in the dark. In family gatherings, carefully observed by David Robinson and shared in private briefings, tensions ran high. The usual undercurrents of power struggles escalated into open arguments behind closed doors, signaling cracks in their alliance. Emily's composure faltered, and Jake's defensiveness became more apparent. Behind the scenes, I worked closely with Lisa Harper to tighten financial oversight. Her team uncovered additional irregularities that shed light on side ventures and undisclosed assets meant to shield proceeds from seizure. These findings supported a second wave of legal action, targeting hidden income streams and demanding forensic transparency. My legal team's strategy included releasing calibrated information to select family members and trusted associates, applying pressure through social channels. The objective was to isolate the dissenting parties, sow doubt in their ranks, and encourage whistleblowers to come forward. This psychological approach complemented the legal and financial offensives, eroding their social support. Additionally, I coordinated with federal agencies to investigate the offshore accounts linked to the covert property sale uncovered by Claire. The involvement of international financial laws promised a harsh response and further complicated Jake and Emily's ability to maneuver. Throughout this phase, my demeanor remained calm and authoritative. I refused to be drawn into emotional confrontations, focusing instead on the bigger picture. Every phone call, every meeting was a calculated move in a larger game of reclaiming control. Recognition of my relentless focus began to permeate among allies and adversaries alike. My grandchildren, once caught in the crossfire, showed renewed respect as I demonstrated strength and composure amid chaos. By late August, efforts culminated in a formal hearing scheduled by the court to address the asset freezes and fraudulent activities. Mark prepared a comprehensive presentation, supported by detailed evidence and witness testimonies. David Robinson's insider information was pivotal. His willingness to testify added an unexpected but decisive weapon to our arsenal. On the opposition side, their defense grew desperate. Attempts to discredit me and my team were countered swiftly, with no opportunity to dilute the truth. Their inconsistent narratives weakened their credibility and exposed ulterior motives. In quiet moments, I reflected on how the balance of power had shifted. What began as a personal betrayal had unfolded into a full-scale confrontation where I held the strategic upper hand. My adaptability and careful planning had transformed me from undervalued patriarch into an unyielding force. The final phase promised intense battles, legal, financial, and emotional. Still, the path forward was clear. I was no longer reacting to attacks. I was orchestrating every move, dictating terms, and setting the pace. This chapter closed with a revelation from David, evidence of a previously unknown collaborator, someone within our family's closest circle who had aided Jake and Emily. This twist demanded immediate reevaluation of alliances and fortified my resolve for the coming showdown. My response would be swift and calculated. The revelation of an unexpected collaborator hidden within the inner family circle altered the game entirely. trust, already fragile, now shattered into fragments that demanded swift recalibration. This intermediary was no distant cousin or indifferent acquaintance, but someone whose actions had undermined my efforts in subtle, yet significant ways. Identifying this betrayer became paramount, lest their interference weaken the fortress I had built. David Robinson, whose insights had become invaluable, delivered the proof one quiet afternoon in early September. Hidden among encrypted messages and covert meeting logs, he presented communications linking an influential family member, my youngest daughter, Sarah Mitchell, to confidential discussions with Jake and Emily. The betrayal was piercing. Sarah had acted as an enabler, providing sensitive financial data that facilitated their maneuvers. This discovery necessitated a careful, measured response. Sarah was not only kin, but someone whose estrangement I had hoped to mend over the years. Yet the stakes transcended personal forgiveness. Decisions would be guided by pragmatism, clarity, and the imperative to protect my legacy. Mark's approach was immediate but discreet. Legal warnings were dispatched to Sarah, outlining the gravity of her actions and the potential liabilities. She was urged to cooperate fully or face consequences both civil and criminal. Meanwhile, I opted for private conversations, urging her to reconcile and join the right side of a family's future. Despite my outreach, resistance prevailed. Sarah's loyalty to Jake and Emily ran deep. Attempts to negotiate faltered as she adopted a defensive posture, thereby isolating herself further. This collapse of internal cohesion strengthened my determination to proceed with unwavering resolve. At this juncture, I authorized a targeted media strategy coordinated by trusted consultants. Controlled disclosures, highlighting the ongoing legal proceedings and allegations of financial misconduct, were released under strict confidentiality agreements. The intent was not to ignite public spectacle, but to exert pressure by illuminating the seriousness of the situation. Word traveled quickly among mutual business partners and social circles, tightening the noose around the conspirators. On the operational front, Lisa Harper's financial investigations uncovered additional layers of shell companies and offshore accounts connected to Sarah's transactions. These revelations expanded our scope of action, prompting new filings for asset recovery and fraud charges. We applied for court sanctions to freeze these newly identified holdings pending full forensic audits. Simultaneously, James Porter's surveillance intensified. Video evidence showed clandestine meetings between Sarah, Jake, and an external associate operating in complex financial networks. These recordings, lawfully obtained, provided unassailable factual support to our case. Family dinners became fraught with palpable tension. Once warm embraces were replaced by curt nods and veiled exchanges. Jake's arrogance faded into anxious calculation, his previously unchecked confidence dissolving as the walls closed in. Emily's mannerisms betrayed growing unease, her controlled facade cracking under the legal and emotional weight. David's insider knowledge revealed further attempts at sabotage, emails indicating efforts to discredit my reputation among business associates and family friends. In response, I countered with a carefully crafted communication strategy, emphasizing transparency, integrity, and steadfast leadership. The legal team prepared for the upcoming court hearings with renewed vigor. Depositions were scheduled, witnesses briefed, and evidence meticulously organized. Mark's leadership ensured every document and testimony was poised to dismantle the opposition's defense thoroughly. I balanced these high-stakes proceedings with continued financial fortifications. Susan Carter coordinated with international banks to monitor suspicious transactions linked to the offshore accounts, collaborating with regulatory agencies to block illicit fund movements effectively. In quieter moments, reflection reminded me that this struggle was a test of endurance and intellect. Every revelation, every setback sharpened my resolve. I embraced the role of strategist, recognizing that victory required unwavering focus and adaptable tactics. As September drew to a close, a decisive move took shape. With mounting evidence and legal favor, we prepared to confront Jake, Emily, and Sarah directly. A confrontation designed not for spectacle but to force accountability, reclaim assets, and restore order. This impending encounter would redefine family boundaries and power dynamics. It would signal the culmination of months of strategic planning and measured responses, setting a precedent for justice grounded in facts and fortified by patience. My position was clear. No forgiveness where deception thrived, no compromise without restitution. The legacy I had built and the trust I once extended demanded nothing less. The day of reckoning arrived with a quiet gravity that belied the storm beneath the surface. Months of meticulous preparation, legal maneuvering, and strategic patience culminated in a formal hearing that would irrevocably alter the trajectory of our fractured family. I entered the courtroom not as a defeated patriarch, but as an architect of justice ready to reclaim what was rightfully mine. Mark Wilson led the presentation with precision, methodically laying out a comprehensive case that exposed the full extent of Jake, Emily, and Sarah's deception. The evidence, financial records, sworn affidavits, recorded conversations, and tangible proof of forged documents, left little room for doubt. Each piece told a story of calculated betrayal, greed, and disregard for familial bonds. The atmosphere was tense, but controlled. Opposing counsel attempted to deflect and minimize the accusations, but their efforts faltered against the weight of undeniable facts. David Robinson's testimony, delivered with clarity and conviction, pierced through any remaining veils of denial. His insider perspective revealed hidden dealings and coercion tactics, painting a vivid picture of conspiracy within. In the courtroom, I observed Jake's expression grow increasingly strained, a mixture of frustration and resignation replacing his once defiant posture. Emily's composure wavered, and Sarah's silence spoke volumes. Their facade unraveled piece by piece before an attentive judge who appeared resolute in delivering justice. The judge ruled decisively. All assets under dispute were permanently frozen, and control of key properties, including the Lombard building, was formally transferred back to me or entities under my direct oversight. Criminal investigations were authorized to probe the fraudulent activities further, with subpoenas issued for additional records and testimonies. Jake, Emily, and Sarah faced not just financial restitution, but potential legal penalties for their actions. The courtroom drama faded, but its consequences echoed throughout our family and enterprises. The aftermath prompted difficult conversations, fractured relationships, harsh realities, and irrevocable shifts in dynamics. Yet, through the turmoil, a new order emerged, one founded on transparency, accountability, and respect. I embraced the mantle of leadership with renewed purpose. Drawing on insights gained from this ordeal, I implemented enhanced governance structures across my businesses and estates, ensuring that such breaches could never recur unnoticed. Trust had to be earned continually, not assumed. My grandchildren's eyes reflected a cautious hope as they witnessed a patriarch who, despite betrayal, stood firm and unwavering. For them, I vowed to restore a legacy tempered by wisdom and vigilance, a family strengthened by truth rather than shattered by deceit. Reflecting on the journey, I acknowledged the transformation within myself, not only a survivor of treachery, but a strategist who harnessed adversity to reclaim control. Emotion, once tempered carefully, gave way to a hard-earned resolve shaped by experience and clarity. Justice in this story was neither myth nor miracle. It was deliberate, painstaking, and coldly calculated, not forged by luck but by relentless determination and unwavering adherence to principle. I learned that respect, once lost, can only be regained through actions, not words. Forgiveness in this case would never come easy, nor should it. True justice required consequence, and consequence was delivered. As the courtroom doors closed behind me that day, a chapter ended, but the story of resilience and vigilance continued. My role as patriarch had changed, evolved, and fortified. The past could not be undone, but the future was mine to shape. Clear-eyed, purposeful, and unshakable. In the quiet that followed, I found satisfaction. Not in revenge, but in the dignity restored, the legacy preserved, and the truth laid bare. This was justice, precise and deserved, marking the emergence of a new era in my family's history. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.